Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to another video. Welcome to another video as I continue talking about the Trump administration's Latin American intervention plans. So, after the United States launched its intervention in Venezuela to capture and arrest dictator of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro, Donald Trump and Marco Rubio have now been threatening that Cuba is next, that they're next on the regime change plans for the US. So my video will be talking about how would the US try to topple the government of Cuba, the communist government there. The United States, since the 1960s, has hated Cuba ever since it went communist after Fidel Castro took over in 1959. And the Cuban American population in Florida, they still have a vendetta against the communist government in Cuba. And Marco Rubio is one of those Cuban American neocons who still has this vendetta against the communist Cuban government, even though he didn't come from Cuba. He was born in the United States. And the timing of it is Cuba right now is at their weakest. Cuba is struggling. They're going through an energy crisis. Cuba is going through power blackouts, outages, and they're teetering. And the Cuban Americans in Florida and all the neocons in the United States, all the Republican neocons, they see this, and they think this is now the great opportunity, the time, to finish off the communist regime in Havana. So if the Trump administration is serious that they want to finish off the communist regime in Cuba, I see two ways that it could go. The first way is the United States might try to have a fuel embargo against Cuba. Right now, the United States is preventing any Venezuelan oil from getting to Cuba. The U.S. Navy ships that are in the Caribbean and near Venezuela, they're seizing Venezuelan oil tankers, and they're making sure that no Venezuelan oil will get to Cuba, and that's going to really hurt Cuba. The United States is also probably going to try to pressure Mexico for them to stop sending oil to Cuba. So if Cuba gets totally cut off from any more oil supplies, that'll speed up the country going through a total collapse. The United States, if it does it that way, what's going to happen is in the short term, there's going to be more suffering of the Cuban people through power outages and no fuel. And if the country does collapse, then what could happen is a refugee crisis. A lot of desperate Cubans will get on their boats and just head to Florida in fear and desperation, and it'll be an immigration nightmare for the United States. And I probably would expect an American military intervention in the case that Cuba collapses, especially because the United States still has a military base in Cuba, the Guantanamo Bay Naval Base. And so the troops there might intervene to do a regime change in Cuba and contain the country to prevent any more refugees coming from it in that event, secure the naval base, the Gitmo Naval Base, and so forth. And I probably see there being an American military intervention there. The second route is if the U.S. does a preemptive military invasion and a combat operation to topple the communist government in Cuba, since they view it as very weak. That could happen, but I see trying to make Cuba collapse is probably the more likely option the Trump administration is looking at. But either way, there probably will be some sort of an American military intervention in Cuba. some of the risks in having a totally failed state, Cuba, that collapses, is Cuba ending up like its neighbor Haiti. Haiti, is a completely failed state. And as a result of all the chaos and instability in that island, Haiti is a major source of refugees for the United States and has been for a very long time. Haiti, their last president who was elected was assassinated in 2021, and Haiti hasn't held any elections since 2016, and the country is in total anarchy and chaos. And it's surprising that the United States has not done an armed military intervention again in that country to try to do some sort of regime change stabilization mission. And if Cuba were to end up exactly like Haiti, that'll be a major immigration headache for Florida. It would be worse than the 1980 Mario boat lift, where over 100,000 Cubans came to the United States by boat to Florida and Georgia throughout the year 1980, and it was an overwhelming immigration nightmare for the United States. And if Cuba collapses, if that's what the U.S. wants, it could get a repeat of what happened in 1980. And then we would have Cuba and Haiti as our two failed states in the Caribbean. While we might be seeing the end of communism on the island of Cuba by the year 2029, another country that I'm going to talk about in another video that is probably on the radar of the Trump administration is Nicaragua. A lot of the Florida Republicans, including like Senator Rick Scott, are already naming Nicaragua is going to be on the checkoff list of regime change to overthrow the dictator Daniel Ortega. And I'll talk about that in another video. And as I mentioned in a previous video, I don't think we've seen the end of American military intervention in Venezuela. So, brace ourselves. We're going to see probably more American military actions, combat in Latin America before the end of this Trump administration.